It was a regular summer afternoon on July 27, 1981. 6-year-old Adam Walsh walked hand in hand with his mother, Reve, into a Sears department store at the Hollywood Mall in Florida. She needed to ask about a lamp, and Adam, like most boys his age, was more interested in the video game display in the toy section. A few older kids were already playing, and Adam quietly joined them. Reve told him to stay there. It would only take a minute. She walked just a few aisles away, and in that short window, everything changed. By the time she returned, Adam was gone. The other boys had disappeared too. Confused, Reve searched the aisles, thinking maybe he'd wandered to another shelf. Store staff made an announcement over the intercom. She checked the entrance, but there was nothing. Within minutes, that small burst of panic turned into full-blown fear. She contacted mall security. Adam's name was called again and again, but still nothing. A search began inside the mall. No one remembered seeing Adam leave. No one saw him being taken. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, right in the middle of a crowded store. By the end of the day, Adam was officially reported missing. For 2 painful weeks, his family hoped. They pleaded, they waited for someone to call, to return him, to bring answers. But on August 10th, a gruesome discovery changed everything. Over 100 miles away, Adam's partial body was found in a drainage canal near Vero Beach. The rest of his body was never recovered. And just like that, a simple shopping trip became every parent's worst nightmare. But who did this, and why did it take decades to find out? Before we move forward in the story, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the Crimeshade. The news of Adam's murder spread fast everywhere in America and hit hard. People across the country were shaken. The idea that a child could be taken from a busy mall in broad daylight and was later found to have been killed was more than tragic. It was terrifying. For many parents, Adam wasn't just another missing child. He was a reflection of their own worst fear. TV networks picked up the story. Newspapers ran headlines that didn't hold back. And in homes everywhere, children were suddenly held a little closer. By the time police confirmed that the severed head belonged to Adam Walsh, the entire nation was watching. Strangers cried for a boy they never met. Families started rethinking how safe their neighborhoods really were. It wasn't just grief, it was fear. Parents who once let their kids walk to school or ride bikes alone now refused to let them out of sight. Parks emptied. Playgrounds fell quiet. A simple trip to the store felt like a risk. The public wanted answers, but more than that, they wanted change. In 1983, Adam's story was turned into a made-for-TV movie titled Adam. It aired nationwide and over 38 million people watched. The film ended with real photos of missing children. A hotline was shown. That night, thousands of calls came in. Some of those children were found because of it. Adam's face was no longer just a symbol of loss. It had become a call to action. His story united strangers, shook law enforcement, and opened a national conversation about child safety. But this wasn't just a tragedy. It became something bigger. In the aftermath of Adam's death, while the country mourned, one man refused to stay silent. John Walsh, Adam's father. What began as unbearable grief turned into unstoppable purpose. John would have disappeared from the public eye. He could have let heartbreak consume him, but instead, he chose to fight for Adam and for every other child who might still be out there. He became a voice for families who had none. He lobbied for stronger laws, pushed for better coordination between police agencies, and showed the world what determined parents were capable of when the system failed them. But John didn't stop there. In 1988, he launched America's Most Wanted, a TV show unlike anything seen before. Each episode spotlighted real fugitives, real victims, and real cases. It gave the public a role in catching criminals. And it worked. Over time, the show helped law enforcement capture more than 1,000 fugitives. For millions of viewers, John wasn't just a grieving father anymore. He was a fighter, a leader, and a symbol of justice. He turned his personal tragedy into a national platform, and he made sure the world wouldn't forget the children who were still missing. He challenged the system, pushed past government red tape, and gave families hope. But even as he helped solve hundreds of other cases, there was one case that never left his mind. Because even while helping others, one question never stopped haunting him. Who really killed Adam? Years passed, and the case remained unsolved. But then a name surfaced, one that would change everything: Ottis Toole. He was already in prison for unrelated crimes when investigators took a closer look. Toole wasn't just any criminal. He was a drifter with a long record of violence and a disturbing connection to another infamous serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas. When questioned about Adam Walsh, Toole gave a confession that chilled even seasoned detectives. He claimed he'd seen Adam outside the Sears store, alone and confused after a security guard had escorted several boys out. Toole said he lured Adam toward his car, a white 1971 Cadillac, with the promise of candy and toys. Adam, shy and soft-spoken, followed him. According to Toole, he drove north on Interstate 95 with Adam in the car. At first, Adam sat quietly, but after a while he began to cry. Toole claimed he panicked and tried to calm him down. When that didn't work, he said things escalated. He told investigators that Adam lost consciousness during the drive. Toole then described taking a turn onto a remote road in St. Lucie County, where, according to him, he made a devastating decision that ended the boy's life. Later, he claimed to have gotten rid of the remains in an abandoned appliance behind a house in Jacksonville. His confession was detailed, it sounded convincing, and it was deeply unsettling. But something didn't sit right. Crucial evidence had vanished. The blood-stained carpet from Toole's car? Lost. The machete? Gone. The car itself? Destroyed before forensic testing could be done. There was nothing left to prove his story. And then came the biggest red flag. Ottis Toole had a long history of false confessions. He'd admitted to murders he didn't commit, then taken his stories back. His statements about Adam changed repeatedly. One day he was guilty. The next day he denied everything. Law enforcement was divided. Some believed the details he gave were too specific to be made up. Others thought he was just seeking attention, manipulating a grieving family and an exhausted police force. Toole died in prison in 1996, never charged for Adam's murder. And with him, whatever truth he carried was buried too. If Toole was lying, then where was the real killer hiding? As doubts grew around Ottis Toole's confession, another name began to surface, one that shocked even seasoned investigators, Jeffrey Dahmer. By the early 1990s, Dahmer was behind bars, serving multiple life sentences for the gruesome murders of 17 young men and boys. He was convicted of multiple murders involving deeply disturbing behavior, including how he treated his victims afterward. But what made Dahmer suddenly relevant to Adam Walsh's case was location and timing. In 1981, the same year Adam was abducted, Jeffrey Dahmer was living in Miami Beach, just a short drive from the Hollywood Mall. He worked at a sandwich shop and lived a relatively quiet life. But then came the eyewitness accounts. Two separate witnesses claimed they saw a suspicious man at the Sears department store the day Adam vanished. One described a man lingering near the toy aisle watching the boys. Another reported seeing a blonde man forcing a struggling child into a blue van before speeding off. Years later, both identified the man they saw as Jeffrey Dahmer. Even more chilling, the shop where Dahmer worked reportedly owned a blue van, matching the one described by witnesses. But investigators hesitated. Dahmer's known victims were all older than Adam. His pattern targeted teens and young men, not 6-year-olds. When questioned about Adam's case, Dahmer responded bluntly, "I've told you everything. How I killed them, who I ate. Why wouldn't I tell you if I did it to someone else?" It was a strange kind of logic, but to some, it sounded sincere. John Walsh himself said he saw no proof linking Dahmer to his son's death. And without hard evidence, the theory faded into uncertainty. So if not Toole, and not Dahmer, who really took Adam Walsh? After more than 2 decades of grief, dead ends, and public pressure, authorities finally made a decision. On December 16, 2008, the Hollywood Police Department officially closed the case, declaring that Ottis Toole had been Adam Walsh's killer all along. Standing beside them at the press conference was John Walsh, the father who had turned his own tragedy into a nationwide movement. He nodded in agreement with the findings. For the cameras, it looked like justice had finally been served. But behind that moment, the story wasn't so simple. The same problems that raised doubts years earlier still lingered. The blood-stained carpet? Gone. The machete? Never recovered. The Cadillac Toole claimed he used? Destroyed before it could be tested. The confession? Full of contradictions. Toole had been dead for 12 years by the time the case was closed, and with him, any possibility of cross-examination, further questioning, or even a trial. Many still questioned whether the closure was symbolic, an attempt to bring peace to a grieving family, even if the truth was murky. And even John, despite accepting the decision, later admitted that he'd never gotten all the answers. For him, the pain never truly left. For others, especially those who had followed the case for years, the doubts continued to grow. 2 suspects, 2 stories, and no solid evidence tying either of them conclusively to Adam's murder. But while justice stayed cloudy, something powerful came from the pain. Though Adam's killer was never brought to trial, his story didn't end in a courtroom. It sparked something bigger, a movement that changed how America protects its children. In the years following Adam's death, major changes swept through the country. One of the earliest was the introduction of Code Adam, a safety protocol now used in department stores nationwide. Whenever a child goes missing inside a store, Code Adam is announced. Employees lock the doors. They search immediately. Time isn't wasted. The name Adam became a signal, not of fear, but of urgency. Then, in 1984, Congress passed the Missing Children's Assistance Act, laying the foundation for what would become the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a hub for resources, coordination, and public awareness that had been desperately lacking before. And the impact didn't stop there. In 2006, on the 25th anniversary of Adam's abduction, President George W. Bush signed the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act, creating the first nationwide sex offender registry. It closed legal loopholes that predators had been using for decades. Then there were the stories of real lives saved. As I said before, after the 1983 TV film Adam aired, more than 38 million viewers watched. At the end, photos of actual missing children flashed across the screen with a hotline number. Among the 13 children found was Brian "Busy" McCain, later known as rapper Busy Bone. A babysitter watching the movie recognized his face and made the call that reunited him with his mother. From tragedy came action. From loss came protection. Adam Walsh's legacy wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about the lives that were saved because of it. But can laws alone stop the monsters in the dark? Adam Walsh was just 6 years old. He never made it home from a trip to the mall, but his story traveled across the world and left a mark that will never fade. His case didn't just change how parents watch their children. It reshaped how a nation responds when a child goes missing. From Code Adam alerts in stores to Amber alerts on phones and highways, his legacy is built into the systems we rely on today. Yet, even with the laws, the headlines, and the confessions, some questions remain unanswered. The truth may have been buried long ago, along with the evidence and the suspects. And for many, the case still doesn't feel truly closed. Sometimes justice and closure don't walk the same path. So we're left to ask ourselves, where do we draw the line between fear and change, between loss and legacy? Adam's story reminds us that even the smallest voice can echo across generations. Thanks for watching Crimeshade. If this story moved you, subscribe for more true cases that shaped the world and the justice that followed.